Maggie had been working at Betty's Diner for over 15 years. She knew the regulars by name, remembered their orders, and always made sure that everyone who walked through the door felt at home. It wasn't much, a small diner on the edge of town, tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. But it was hers, and she took pride in it. The place was familiar, comforting even, and the staff had become like family. She worked long hours, mostly double shifts, and sometimes felt the weight of every late-night shift on her shoulders. But she had never complained. She'd worked hard her whole life, and this job, though it wasn't glamorous, kept food on the table and a roof over her head. And more than anything, it kept her connected to the community. She had come to know everyone, especially the homeless man who sometimes wandered into the diner. His name was Harold. He was a quiet man, with a scruffy beard and a worn-out coat. He didn't cause any trouble. He came in, ordered a cup of coffee, and sat quietly in the back booth by the window. He never stayed long, just long enough to warm up before leaving. But Maggie noticed how people treated him when he came in. Some of the customers would look at him with disdain, others would pretend not to notice, and the younger waitstaff often rolled their eyes, muttering under their breath. Maggie always made sure to treat him with respect. She never made him feel like an inconvenience, always offering him a warm smile and a kind word. But one Thursday afternoon, everything changed. It was a slow day at Betty's Diner. Maggie was behind the counter, wiping down the surface and chatting with the cook Rick when Harold came in. It had been a cold day, and Maggie could see the shivers in his shoulders as he walked through the door, his boots scraping against the floor. "Hey, Harold, the usual?" Maggie called, offering him her usual smile. He nodded, his voice soft. "Yeah, just the coffee. Black, please." As she poured his coffee, she overheard a group of customers sitting near the window whispering and laughing. She caught snippets of their conversation. "Look at that guy," one of them sneered. "Why does he always come in here? Doesn't he have somewhere else to go?" Maggie's heart tightened. She had heard comments like these before. But this time something inside her snapped. She was tired of the judgment, tired of seeing people like Harold treated like they were invisible. She walked over to their table, her hands on her hips. "Hey," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We don't tolerate that kind of talk in here. He's a paying customer just like you. Show some respect." The group stared at her, surprised by her sudden confrontation. One of the men, a young guy who looked to be in his late 20s, scoffed and stood up. "What, you're defending him?" he said, his voice rising. "He's a nobody. He doesn't belong in here with the rest of us." Maggie's jaw clenched. "He's a human being," she said firmly, "and he deserves to be treated with dignity, just like anyone else." But before the situation could escalate further, the diner's door opened, and a man stepped in, one Maggie had never expected to see in her small-town diner. It was Jonathan Marks, the famous actor. Maggie had seen him on TV countless times, but she never imagined he would walk into Betty's Diner. He glanced around the room before his eyes settled on Maggie and Harold. The actor's eyes narrowed when he saw the confrontation unfolding. He stood silently by the door, watching, his presence commanding the room's attention. Maggie could feel the tension in the air. She was standing up for Harold, and for the first time it felt like she wasn't alone. Jonathan Marks walked toward the table where the group was sitting, his calm demeanor cutting through the uncomfortable silence. "Excuse me," Jonathan said, his voice smooth but firm. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation." The young man who had been arguing with Maggie looked up at Jonathan, his eyes wide in disbelief. "What's the problem?" he asked, clearly confused by the unexpected encounter. Jonathan smiled, though it was a sharp, almost challenging smile. "The problem," he said, "is that people like you don't seem to understand basic human decency. You're here enjoying a nice meal, while this man," he pointed to Harold, who had been quietly watching, "just wants a warm cup of coffee. You think you're better than him? I don't think so." The group was stunned into silence. The young man opened his mouth to protest, but Jonathan didn't give him the chance. "You see," Jonathan continued, A man's worth isn't determined by his clothes or his bank account. It's determined by his character. And from where I'm standing, it looks like the person with more character in this room isn't the one in the fancy suit. It's the guy who's just trying to get by, doing the best he can. The room was still. Jonathan's words echoed, and even the customers who had been whispering seemed to realize the gravity of the situation. Jonathan turned back to Maggie, offering a supportive nod. You did the right thing. This man deserves kindness, just like anyone else. Maggie felt a wave of relief wash over her. She hadn't expected someone like Jonathan Marks to speak up for her, or for Harold. But here he was, standing in solidarity with them. The group of customers slowly got up, their faces flushed with embarrassment. They didn't say anything more as they left the diner, muttering to each other under their breath. Maggie turned to Jonathan, her heart racing. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know what to say." Jonathan smiled warmly. "It was the least I could do. People like Harold, they don't need to be treated like they're invisible. It takes courage to stand up for what's right." But the next day, the unexpected happened. Maggie arrived at Betty's diner for her usual morning shift, only to find that things were not as she had left them the night before. When she walked through the door, her boss Tom was waiting for her by the counter, his face grim. "Maggie, we need to talk," he said, motioning for her to step into the back office. Her stomach dropped. She had a sinking feeling about what was coming. Once inside, Tom wasted no time. "You've been fired," he said flatly, "for your behavior yesterday. You've caused a scene, and that's not what we do here. We don't make waves." Maggie stared at him, stunned. "What? For defending a man who was just trying to enjoy a cup of coffee?" Tom shook his head. "You crossed a line, Maggie. You don't tell customers how to behave. And you don't create drama in my diner. You're done." Maggie felt a lump form in her throat. She couldn't believe it. After everything she'd given to this place, this was how she was treated. She grabbed her coat, walking out of the diner in a daze. But as she stepped onto the sidewalk, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She took it out and, to her surprise, the caller ID read, Jonathan Marks. She answered quickly. "Hello?" "Maggie, it's Jonathan," he said, his voice warm and concerned. "I heard about what happened yesterday. I just want you to know that I'm on your side. I've already made a few calls. I've got a place for you. I'm offering you a job at my restaurant in LA. Maggie's heart skipped a beat. "Wait, what?" Jonathan chuckled. "I know it's sudden, but you stood up for the right thing. And I believe you've got a lot to offer. Come work with me. I think you'll find that there's a place for people who care about others in the world." Tears welled up in Maggie's eyes as the enormity of what was happening sank in. The offer was life-changing. A job working with one of the most famous celebrities in the world. It was a dream she hadn't even dared to imagine. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Jonathan said kindly. "Just come. I'll have a plane ticket ready for you." A week later, Maggie boarded a plane to Los Angeles, leaving behind the small diner and the life she had known for so long. She was scared, nervous, and uncertain. But she also felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. When she arrived in LA, Jonathan met her at the airport with a warm smile. "Welcome to the new chapter of your life," he said, guiding her to a sleek car waiting outside. Maggie looked out the window as they drove through the city, her heart swelling with a sense of possibility. She had stood up for what was right, and now she was being given the chance to live her dream. It wasn't just about the job. It was about the chance to be seen, to be valued for who she was, and to have the opportunity to make a real difference. And as Maggie stepped into the new restaurant, ready to begin her new life, she knew that everything had changed. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was someone who had the power to stand up for others, and now she had a platform to make a difference.